I call to order the committee of the whole meeting of Monday, June 15th, 2020. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Mayor Berman,
Here.
Trustee Capino,
Here.
Trustee Lowry,
Here.
Trustee Curtis,
Here.
Trustee Carroll,
Here.
Trustee Martinez,
Here.
Trustee Gately,
Here.
Any comments? Trustee comments? Discussion on our mobile food vendor amendment, Steve. Mr. Bosco, is that yours?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I muted myself. Can you hear me now?
You're better.
All right. Sorry. The item on the committee of the whole agenda is the amendment to the mobile food vendor code. The board may remember it was about 4 years ago. We were pretty progressive in the sense that there were a lot of towns looking at mobile food vendors, but we actually went forward and allowed them in our town as we knew that that was becoming a trend. And the issue at that time was we were very focused on the fact that there were people interested in potentially leaving trailers on private property, but leaving them there for months at a time. So when we regulated mobile food vendors, we were very specific to mobile food trucks. Well, in the last 4 years, there's definitely been an uptick, at least in the festivals and whatnot, that we see that food trailers are becoming real popular, ones that are attached to a vehicle and then driven to an event and then cooked out of in the back. I mean, we use one at one of our events every year down here at the park. So basically what happened was we had a recent subdivision want to get together and do something for their neighborhood. And when we were going through the codes, we realized that they wanted to have some trailers, but the trailers weren't ever addressed in the code. So one of the things we wanted to do is make a few very small changes to the code to basically create a section for trailers, but at the same time, loosen up the restrictions a little bit for food trucks and trailers for private events. So right now we limit it to 2 hours. The new code would allow them to have it for 4 because not a lot of people would have an event and have a food truck for only 2 hours or a trailer for 2 hours. So Mike, I was going to kick this to you to finish off if you would like to keep going with it.
Yeah, you hit the important points. Obviously, we included trailer as part of that, as it was once deemed to be more of a stationary item. We actually broke it up into private property versus public property. Right now, the code allows for 2 hours, but in the amendment, we would go from 2 hours on public property, 4 hours on private. We went through our code and looked at the traffic ordinances and parking regulations, and we found that some of the major roads in town were not addressed under the parking code. So we actually did list the major airport road, auto road as areas that were prohibited for mobile food truck parking. So we put those specifically in these provisions so they could not stop there. And then we included, like Steve had said, just other appurtenances that would be used as some sort of mobile food vendor device.
Hey, Mike, I noticed that Banbury wasn't in that list of roads. I was curious, why not?
That's more of a residential collector street. Typically, you probably would see, that'd be maybe a more ideal place to stop. You do have, parks along the way as well.
There aren't that's the point. There aren't any places between 25 and Sharon to park.
Yeah, Trustee Lowry, to your point, when we went through this last week when we were putting the code together, we really hit the areas. Most of the areas are 4-lane roads or roads that have high speed limits or are connectors to sections of town. Banbury Road, I mean, our current code allows mobile food trucks right now to spend 2 hours on Banbury Road if they wanted to. The reason that we didn't go through that is and I'm not saying that we can't do that, but if you add Banbury Road, which is unique in the sense that it is 30 miles per hour, but if you add Banbury Road, there are a lot of subdivisions in town that have collector roads that are similar. I mean, Tanner Trails alone has 3 or 4 roads that span the entire northwest side of our community without stop signs or whatnot for at least 5 or 6 blocks.
Well, I was just thinking in terms of if there's no room to park for any length of time on Banbury. If you look, there's no shoulder. So that's especially between Sharon and 25 past your house, Steve. You know, there's nowhere to park. So I thought that would be a good road to add.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a good point about Banbury. It is, to my knowledge, it's the only residential road in town that's 30 miles per hour.
I'm okay with all of your changes except the bumping it up to 4 hours on private property. I think that's too long. I think this is not the time in extending hours for food trucks when every restaurant in our town has just been shut down for 60 days. I think it's unfair to the restaurants that are opening up. And I live in on the street where the food truck was this past Friday. 2 hours is more than enough time. That's my opinion. So I'm good with everything except changing the hours. And I don't understand why you would have 4 hours in private property but 2 hours on public property. Why have the difference?
Because with public property, there's a couple reasons. So on private property, let's say it's a parking lot, 4 hours wouldn't make too much of a difference with traffic flow or whatnot. But if you let a trailer, let's say a barbecue trailer that's hitched to a car, park in front of somebody's house on a curb for 4 hours, not only is it a detriment to the traffic on that road, but it's also someone who lives in that house doesn't have a say because it's public property to park on the street. So we were trying to keep it at 2 hours so that someone couldn't just pull in front of somebody's house and just leave it there for 4.
So
A long time.
I think 2 hours is plenty, and if they want it longer than that, let them apply for a special event permit.
Yeah, we also looked at 4 hours because what that did was, and we did look at restaurant equity as a discussion point. We did it for 4 hours because that assumes you can't really serve more than 1 or 2 meals per day. At 4 hours, you cannot serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner as you could as a brick and mortar restaurant. So we did take that in consideration for our 4 hour duration.
Yeah, but these food trucks don't benefit the village at all. We get a $50 permit fee and we get no sales tax revenue, whereas our restaurants in town, we get sales tax revenue from them being able to sell.
I think Mark Carroll's making some very good points, actually.
Yeah, I agree with Mark too. Yeah, I do think it may actually hurt the other businesses that are already struggling. I mean, yeah, that's my agreement on that.
I don't think that should be the deciding factor. I mean, that's what being in business is about. It's innovating and doing what you can to meet demand. We're going into graduation season now, and I know of several families who are thinking about having a food truck. Would this prohibit them from having a food truck for 2-3 hours? I mean, I have no problem with the food trucks. I don't think it's going to do anything with competition. I think it's going to be good for competition. I understand our environment right now, but I think we need to have maintain a free market within the village.
I agree with Laura. I think getting a food truck coming out for 2 hours from the food truck side, they don't, they're a slow operation anyway. So, I mean, working for 2 hours probably doesn't even make it worth anybody's while to come out. So, yeah, I agree with Laura. I think, I don't know. I just think it's a good opportunity for residents. I think they probably know what restaurants are in town, and I don't think we're going to see them on every corner, but I think it is an opportunity to have some event. Steve, fill me in on the sales tax. So how does that work? Wherever they come from, is that who gets the sales tax, or?
No, honestly, I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if Bill knows that answer. I don't know if it's point of sale from where they're at or where their company's located.
So I think,
Steve, have we had many people asking for like food vendor trucks in their events or like block parties? Is that what brought this up? I'm just curious.
Recently,
It came up because our subdivision opened, it's Tanner Trails wanted it for several weekends over the summer in the church parking lot in Tanner Trail. So that's what kind of started this conversation. And I think there's a difference in the type of food truck. When you're putting it in a private parking lot and opening it up to residents in that does have a direct impact on a restaurant. Whereas if I, as a private homeowner, have it for a graduation party in my front yard, there's a big difference between that. And because you're not opening it up to the entire community.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Steve, other than the church on the west side, are there other like people requesting food trucks?
No, we don't get a lot of food truck applications. I think, off the top of my head, I think we got 1 or 2 applications all of last year to be a food truck. And that's part of the issue is, quite frankly, I'm pretty confident that trucks are in town, just not getting the permit sometimes. Like a private homeowner doesn't always know to call the village and get, tell their food truck to get the permit from the police department. So, I would be remiss to think that someone isn't actually, like Laura said, having a barbecue or something for a graduation. And I think we're starting to see some of that. And not everyone knows to get a special event permit. And if they do, sometimes what ends up happening is
why do you need a permit for a food truck and not a caterer? I don't understand needing a permit for something that's, temporary.
So exactly. So we regulated food trucks specifically because originally the board didn't want, this came up 4 years ago, and the main discussion was about business equity. And it was the issue of food trucks showing up and setting up shop every day at the same location or leaving their trailer in a parking lot attached to a building with water running and everything, and actually acting as a pseudo business brick and mortar. We haven't had a lot of issues with residential renting of the trucks, and right now they don't have to. They have to come in and get a permit if they're operating as a food truck in our town. That's just the way the code's been for 4 years. So anyone who's, let's say, an ice cream truck or a hot dog truck, whatever, they technically are supposed to get a permit from the county to have food sales, and then they are supposed to regulate with the village. And if I remember correctly, a part of that conversation was for our ability to do background checks on the drivers.
Steve, my question is to the homeowner. Like, if I want to have a food truck come for my son's graduation party, do I need to get a permit?
The resident doesn't need to get a permit right now. The food truck needs to be licensed with the village for $50 a year, and that allows us to do the background check. That's all it is for the resident. Doesn't have to do anything. The issue is if somebody wants a truck or a trailer on private property right now for more than 2 hours, so let's say you want to park it in your driveway, technically speaking, our code only limits it to 2 hours, and it says that you have to come back to the village and get a special event permit for anything longer than that. Which is why we said if we bump it to 4, the idea was that someone has a party, they would never need to come to the village for a permit. But I did want to point out one thing, in the conversations Mike and I had back and forth on this, there was some conversation of if the board wanted to move forward, one of the things you can do to really make sure that this doesn't become someone who shows up at the same property 5 days a week, 4 hours a day, is you can also put in the code that a truck cannot come back to the same location more than 2 consecutive days unless it's a festival or something. I mean, you can do stuff so that someone wouldn't come back and just keep showing up at the same gas station or the same shopping mall.
Yeah, that'd make it hard for them to compete then. So I see what you're saying. It'd be better for the homeowner and less the businesses. That's kind of a compromise to put that in there.
I agree. That'd be good.
Yeah.
I agree, yeah. At least that.
Let me ask you this, Steve. With the permit, would they, so they would be able to extend the period of time that they're parked, right? And so basically anybody can get a permit, and that could be a daily thing, correct?
Yeah, so if someone wants a special event permit, the issue is it's the timing because it needs village board approval. So
I see.
that's the problem.
So it's not something.
Because Right, if a resident calls and complains about their neighbor having a food truck or something in the driveway, and they didn't get the permit from the village, it's not like I can just issue the permit. I have to take it to the village board for approval.
Okay, so it's not an electronic permit that can easily just pay their fee and that's it. It's something that has to have board approval.
And that's because, and I want to make this clear, the special event permit is for specific reasons. The food truck, when we did this code 4 years ago, we did it as a catch-all in case someone really wanted to have a food truck for a longer period of time that they can request a special event permit. A special event permit is typically just utilized, which is why we don't have a lot on agendas. We did it because we didn't want homeowners to have to always come back and get permits from the village for things. So we only made permits necessary if they need if they're serving liquor at an event, if they're using our right-of-way or our public roads, if they're using our staff, things like that that actually trigger a requirement of the village, something that might even shift liability to us in some way. This was just a catch-all by giving residents the option to have a food truck by coming to the village and asking for extended hours.
So this special event permit will most likely address somebody that wants to set up a food truck anywhere for more than 2 to 4 hours and come back daily if they wanted to, right?
Correct. What we were trying to do with with this situation, what we were trying to do with the group that was organizing the food trucks is if the private property owner was willing to, sign on as the applicant or whatnot, because it's their property being utilized, we were going to issue a special event permit to the board for review, and that would have included every day of the event. So the special event would have said every Saturday from 4 to 8 p.m. from this week till this week. And the board could have reviewed that all at one time. This was the first time in 4 years that we've actually gotten somebody to want to do a group event like that where it was a week-by-week event. To Laura's point earlier, most of the time I would assume that it's people who are literally just looking to have a private event and they think it's cool to have, an ice cream truck show up for 4 hours.
Well, I'm in favor of the compromise language. And that would be the food truck would not be allowed to go to the same place every day endlessly. And if a resident would like to have a food truck at their house for 4 hours, I think that's, in my opinion, is fine.
If the board is okay with that, and that's where everyone wants to go, then what I will do is I will work with Mike Toth to come up with that one line. And if it's just that one line that says that, we'll keep the time at 4 hours, but we'll say, how about 2 consecutive days and no more than X number of days in a week? 2 consecutive days, no more than 3 or 4 days a week, something like that. Would that be acceptable to bring back?
How about 2 days in a row?
And not allowed 2 days in a row?
In what circumstances would there be like 3 or 4 times a week?
Right.
Once again, we haven't had this happen other than festivals, but I know that there are places where you drive by and you might see someone with a hot dog cart show up at a gas station and sit there for 3-4 days in a row if business is good. And if you want to not allow that to, allow brick and mortars to compete on their own, then what I can do is Mike and I can come up with language that says no more than,
I would say 1 day a week. I mean, if we're just talking, my whole feeling behind this was for neighborhoods to have like what's going on, have something different. But really, I don't think we wanted them to sit in JCPenney parking lot and open up shop. At least my opinion. I think that would hurt the restaurants. But I think if Banbury Ridge has the taco truck to show up on a Saturday to have a get together for a neighborhood, I think that's my feeling towards that. I don't want it to replace restaurants. So I would say 1 day and you're done, maybe per week or per month or something like that.
Yeah, Trustee Lauer.
Maybe per week.
Yeah. That's fine. That's good. Trustee Lauer, an example would be the Menards parking lot has a barbecue place. I don't know if they're there all weekend, but they definitely set up pretty much every week in front of Menards. So that would be an example of someone who continuously comes back.
Well, I think that, but see, that starts dipping into the businesses. That's
Right.
Yeah, so once a
I
week,
think I agree with Mark Gately when he said that somebody having a private party, sure, it would have to be like 4 hours. Parties don't last 2 hours. But somebody was running a business and sets up a shop every 3 days a week, you know, that's going to be a consistent place to eat and draw business away from the established restaurants.
Right.
I see
Yeah,
it.
we used to, do you remember, it was like 3 or 4 years ago, there was the one that set up by the car wash in the clock tower all summer for 2 years in a row. I think he was there several days a week, and it was like a big hot dog stand.
That was a long time ago.
It was only 3 or 4 years ago, wasn't it?
Well,
As to why we're so concerned about competition within the village. I mean, certain people like certain ways to get their food, and I don't think we should be limiting any business that wants to do business and give our residents a choice. I mean, we don't limit outside landscape companies from coming in and cutting somebody's grass, or we don't limit an outside, real estate agency from coming in and selling houses outside of a neighborhood from where they come from. I really don't think that this is our place and our position to be limiting who and what type of businesses and how they conduct their business within our village. We're limiting choice. And I don't agree with that at all.
Well, except for the fact that you make a point, but the point is the established restaurants generate a lot more revenue for the village than somebody comes in from outside.
We shouldn't have allowed UFC Gym to open either, if that's going to be our logic and our reasoning. We cannot pick and choose who gets to operate and who doesn't. That's not, the definition of a free market.
An established business would generate tax revenue, I believe. It's sales tax revenue.
Not the gym.
I don't know where these trucks come from. Steve, you know where their sales tax, you said you didn't know?
I think Bill was trying to answer that, I think, at one point. Was that correct, Bill?
Yeah, typically, I haven't looked at the Illinois Department of Revenue's guidelines in a while, but I believe it's still point of sale. So in theory, if there's a food truck in town, the appropriate sales taxes, should be collected and remitted appropriately to the state and back, to the village and the various entities. Does that consistently happen? It's hard to say, especially if they just come into town once or twice and they're out. It's hard to know, and it's hard because some of the reporting can lag. So it's probably not as certain, as a typical brick and mortar restaurant.
Well, and I think, I respectfully disagree with you, Laura. I think that our brick and mortar restaurants have made a significant investment in their overhead and in the village, whereas a mobile food truck, by its very nature, has no ties to the village, and we don't have to prefer a mobile food truck as opposed to people that have made investment, employ residents, and have actually decided to take root in our village.
So I think
I have a question about food trucks. Don't they have to get a county permit for, from the health department to make sure that they're up to snuff? And don't they have to be, so they are regulated by the state too, aren't they?
Yes, King County, and we require that in our code. When anyone applies for a food truck license through the village, they also have to have their King County permit to sell mobily.
And then how often do they inspect those trucks? I see them like once in a while on a job site. I don't think I'd eat off them. The ones that I see, but don't they have to go through like once in a while, some type of inspection? I would think, right?
It's been my experience that, and I could be wrong, but obviously once a year they have to come back in. So I don't know if they get inspected once a year, but I do know that when there are major festivals and whatnot that a lot of these trucks go to, the county does make inspections where they will just show up randomly at some of these events, and they do go and check these vendors periodically to see.
Make sure everything's safe and everything. Okay. Okay, that's good. At least there's something.
So if I heard the board right, and this is the way to bring this back to the village board for a vote next time, keep the 4 hours with the caveat that no one can be in one location for more than one time a week, or is it the whole village once a week? Just one location?
Yeah.
Yeah, one location.
All right, one location within the village once a week. And then Banbury Road, was that something that we were, that's easy to add if the board would like to add that as well?
I think
Yeah.
it'd be wise
I
to
agree
add
with Mike, yeah.
Okay, then we'll make those changes and bring it back to the village board for the next meeting.
Very good. Everybody completed the discussion? All right, moving on. I need a motion to go to an executive session to discuss property acquisition. We will not be returning to the board meeting. So any of our
Motion to go to exec session.
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're going into exec session.